It all happened so suddenly. Emma, a young girl with a striking resemblance to my late wife Emma, appeared before me. And then she asked me to become her father. Perhaps there was some invisible thread connecting me, Emma, and this girl named Harper. Was this fate or mere coincidence, or could it be something else? My name is Andrew Miller. I'm 35 years old. I was married, but my wife is no longer in this world. Emma and I got married when we were both 26 years old, but we never had children. No, we couldn't have children.
I need to tell you up front. I've been through pregnancy and childbirth before, but due to complications, I had a full hysterectomy. So I can't have children.
She confessed this to me shortly after we started dating. We had met through our mutual friends and spent time together as friends before becoming romantically involved. But just as we were about to start dating, she dropped this news on me. However, I wasn't fazed and answered like this. It's okay. I don't want kids either. I don't feel like I deserve to be a father, nor do I even want to be. Just like you have your reasons, I have mine. Hearing this, Emma gave me a bittersweet smile. From that point on, we never spoke of children, nor did we pry into each other's past. Our relationship didn't need children. We got married and began a happy life together. My parents had retired abroad, hoping to enjoy their golden years together. Emma's mother had already passed away from a stroke, and her father, suffering from dementia, was living in a care facility. When we went to introduce ourselves as a married couple, her father, who married late in his life, was already so old that he didn't even recognize Emma as his daughter. Since then, our interactions with him were kept to a minimum. Emma, who couldn't have children, and I, who didn't want any, might have been a perfect match in our own way. However, that happiness didn't last long.
There's a woman at work who was diagnosed with breast cancer. She's only 41. It's terrifying. They say more and more women in their 20s and 30s are getting it. I think I should get checked.
You're right. I think getting screened early rather than waiting until 40 is a smart idea. As a neurosurgeon, I'd heard similar advice from an old med school friend who became an OB-GYN. So I agreed wholeheartedly with her decision to get checked. But this set off a chain of events that drastically changed our fate. Emma was 27 when her breast cancer screening came back positive, and the cancer had already progressed to stage 3. After 3 years of battling the disease, with the cancer spreading even to her brain, she passed away at the age of 30. I couldn't help but think that if I had urged her to get checked sooner, things might have turned out differently. As I said my final goodbyes to Emma, I blamed myself over and over again. But no amount of tears could change the outcome. I lived each empty day feeling inadequate as a doctor, and before I knew it, 5 years had passed. On this particular day, I was heading to the hospital, stifling a yawn. There were many surgeries lined up, and the outpatient clinic was always overcrowded. It was enough to make anyone feel overwhelmed. Doctors are human after all, and it's only natural to feel fatigue and stress. Yet after losing Emma, I became determined to save as many lives as possible and always give my patients and their families the best care. By the time I was 35, I had become a respected physician. Many in my field were starting their own private practices at this age. But I never had any desire to do that. I continued working at the general hospital and had no intention of changing that. Whenever I thought of Emma, I couldn't imagine myself taking on the responsibility of being a hospital director. One day, as I was picking out my usual lunch at the cafeteria, I felt a dull thud on my back. When I turned around, a teenage girl had wrapped her arms around me from behind. I was frozen, unsure of what had just happened. "Well," I spoke hesitantly, and the girl slowly raised her face. In that instant, I felt as though I'd forgotten how to breathe. "Emma?" I whispered her name in a raspy voice, tears brimming in my eyes. I'm a man of science. I don't believe in ghosts. All of it is just superstition. But for a fleeting moment, I thought Emma had come back to life. That's how much this girl looked like her. "No way, Emma. Is it really you?" The girl, with her clear, unwavering gaze, said,
"Please, be my father."
I froze, unable to comprehend what was happening. Then, a memory of something Emma had once told me during her lifetime resurfaced.
Remember how I told you that I had experienced pregnancy and childbirth before we started dating? That happened when I was 17.
Apparently, Emma had been dating a boyfriend 2 years older than her at the time. She was a high school freshman, and he was a senior. At first, they had a typical, innocent high school relationship, but things changed after he graduated and started working. Most high schoolers, and especially younger students, rely on parents or guardians to live. But once he started earning money on his own, he made a terrible mistake.
I guess I was a little curious about the adult world myself. One of my senior friends had already gotten married and had a baby with her husband around that time. Of course, he didn't force me or anything. I made that choice myself.
But one encounter isn't supposed to lead to pregnancy. That naive belief has caused so much heartbreak in the world. I bit my lip hard, feeling disgust toward the boyfriend she had at the time. But I forced myself to calm down and continued listening to Emma's story.
Getting pregnant at 17 while still in high school. Of course, my parents were shocked and beyond angry, really. But they didn't tell me to abandon the baby. However, they did set some conditions. I had to take a year off to give birth, put the baby up for adoption, and then graduate high school. Breaking up with my boyfriend was also non-negotiable. I gave birth under those terms.
At the very least, it seemed that no adults around Emma ever suggested she do anything drastic regarding the baby. A child cannot choose their parents or their circumstances. In the end, Emma gave birth to a baby girl at 17 and placed her in an orphanage right after delivery. Her ex-boyfriend and his parents deeply apologized and paid significant compensation before moving far away and cutting all ties. But maybe that was for the best. A person who had made such a mistake had no business staying near Emma. After that, Emma threw herself into her studies and went on to attend a prestigious university. Maybe because she knew she couldn't have children anymore, or perhaps out of guilt for what had happened, she never dated anyone else. Then, why did you date me?
I don't know. With you, Andrew, I just felt like things would work out. Not for any logical reason, just fate.
I gave a wry smile, but didn't deny it, as part of me also believed that my meeting with Emma had been something special. Even though we made it to marriage, fate cruelly tore Emma away from me. Was I truly meant to be with her? After losing her, I asked myself that question countless times, only to find myself sinking deeper into darkness. As I spent my faded, colorless days, I found myself wishing time would pass faster. a girl who was the spitting image of Emma appeared before me.
Well, are you okay? You look really pale.
Her voice snapped me back to reality. It felt like I had just seen my entire life flash before my eyes, but in reality, only 30 seconds had passed. The girl might look like Emma, but she was someone else entirely. I knew that, yet I couldn't help but ask, "What's your name?" The girl smiled, her face blooming like a flower. That smiling face was, without a doubt, just like Emma's. The dimples that appeared, and the slight parting of her lips when she smiled. Every part of me wanted to believe she was Emma.
Oh. I'm sorry for surprising you. Nice to meet you. I'm Harper Johnson.
Hearing her name made me feel both disappointed and strangely relieved. Of course, the girl in front of me wasn't Emma. Her voice and way of speaking were entirely different. Her face may have looked similar. But unlike the gentle Emma, this girl, Harper, was bright, energetic, and had an unwavering gaze. Harper glanced around. We were in the hospital cafeteria, and since it was lunchtime, the place was packed with patients and staff alike. There was no way we could have a proper conversation there, so I suggested moving to the courtyard. "You're buying that, right? I'll pay for it together." I casually took the tea bottle from her hands, quickly paid for both of our items, and led her to the courtyard. Harper, as she now introduced herself, was Emma's biological daughter, and she had recently enrolled in the university's medical program this spring. No wonder she looked so much like Emma. Just as I was finally starting to piece everything together, Harper's smile faded, and she spoke seriously.
If you've heard about me from her, you probably already know. I grew up in an orphanage. I took the name Johnson from the head of the facility. I know my mother's surname is technically correct, but I don't want to use it. I hate her. That's all there is to it.
Emma was my beloved wife, but from Harper's perspective, it made perfect sense to resent her. Hearing someone call my wife hateful filled me with anger, yet a younger version of myself seemed to emerge and say to the presence me, "She's justified, you can't deny that." Apparently, Harper had spent her life in an orphanage, but she managed to uncover information about her mother by chance. At the same time, she learned about me, her mother's husband, and came all the way to meet me after discovering I worked at the general hospital she attended. But her actions puzzled me. I was indeed married to Emma, your mother, and I haven't remarried or even thought about it. I can understand wanting to be adopted by someone because you grew up without parents. But didn't you say you hate Emma? So why? When I asked her directly, Harper's eyes wavered for a brief moment. Her words about hating Emma didn't seem like a lie. But looking at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the entire truth either. Harper remained silent, so I continued. I never wanted children. That's one of the reasons I married Emma. She couldn't have children due to her hysterectomy. A cold-hearted man like me isn't fit to be a husband or a father. I'm sorry, Harper, but I can't grant your request. Half of what I said was true, and half was a lie. Not once had I ever seen Emma in that way. Whether or not she had a womb, I still would have fallen in love with her. But it was true that I didn't see myself as fit to be a father. Harper was an exceptional young woman destined to become a doctor, with a bright future ahead of her. Growing up in an orphanage and getting accepted into medical school was no small feat. It must have taken incredible effort. That's why, no matter her circumstances, I believed she shouldn't be tied to someone like me. So even though my words were cold, I chose to push her away. But Harper only tilted her head in confusion, as if something didn't make sense. Just as I was wondering what could be puzzling her so much, she said something astonishing.
The fact that you married my mother is just a bonus. Before that, you made a promise to me. You told me you'd make me part of your family. And then you ended up marrying the woman who gave birth to me. If that's not fate, what is?
She said something I had absolutely no recollection of, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Confused, I decided to pause the conversation for the time being. Let's talk about this later. I have a surgery scheduled this afternoon. I'm sorry. I stood up. There was nothing more to say, and I figured it was best to end it here for her sake. But as I turned to leave, Harper hurried after me, clutching her head and collapsing on the spot.
Ouch, it hurts.
Are you okay?
It's fine now. I've been having bad headaches lately, probably from all the stress after pushing myself so hard for my exams. I've always had migraines.
After saying that, Harper stood up and left with a cheerful, "See you later." From that day on, Harper began to follow me around. Of course, she didn't barge in while I was working or disrupt me. She stayed within reasonable bounds, sometimes even coming to me with questions as a med student, so I couldn't just brush her off. Eventually, my supervisor took notice and approached me.
She's a very dedicated student. She seems really fond of you, Andrew. Is she a relative? As a professor, I can't encourage favoritism toward a single student, but maybe you could take some time to listen to her?
Since my supervisor had said so, I had no choice but to listen to Harper. "Harper, if you're okay with it, how about we go out to dinner?" Harper beamed with exaggerated delight and readily accepted. We ended up going to a local diner known for its amazing food. I'd always wanted to try it. It wasn't a fancy restaurant with city views, but a casual diner, so I worried she might be disappointed. But to my surprise, Harper looked genuinely happy. As she slurped her soup, she asked,
So, did you remember?
When I stayed silent, her expression turned serious, a sharp contrast to her usual demeanor.
When I was still at the orphanage, you visited several times, didn't you? You were the one who donated supplies to our facility, weren't you?
Her words made me freeze. My spoon halted midair. You remember that? Harper nodded slowly. The truth was, I had grown up in an orphanage myself and endured a tough childhood. One day, by a stroke of luck, I was blessed with a wonderful opportunity and was adopted by the Miller family, my current foster parents. My life changed drastically. I went from hardship to a life of comfort, where I was even able to attend tutoring classes. That's how I became a doctor. But I never forgot the children still living in the orphanage. So I worked part-time jobs and donated all my earnings to the facility. I started doing that when I was 21, and Harper would have been about 4 years old at the time. Harper gently blew on her soup to cool it down and tucked her long hair behind her ear before taking a bite of her noodles. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and spoke again, her voice firm.
You always brought us toys and school supplies, and you played with us. That day, you made me a promise, didn't you?
Memories from that time came flooding back. One day, while visiting the orphanage as usual, a little girl approached me and asked with innocent eyes to become part of my family. I gently patted her head and told her, "If you're a good girl, we'll be family someday." We sealed it with a pinky promise, but I assumed she would forget it soon, as children often do. That little girl had grown up and appeared before me again as Harper. She had remembered our promise all along and worked tirelessly to get into medical school in the hopes of reuniting with me. In other words, our meeting wasn't a coincidence, and it was inevitable.
The story about learning about my mother by accident was just a cover. I was looking for you. But when I said it was fate, I meant it. You married the woman who gave birth to me and never remarried. Please make me your daughter. We made a promise, didn't we?
Hearing her speak so earnestly, I knew brushing her off like I usually did would be disrespectful. With that in mind, I nodded and made her a suggestion. "There's somewhere I'd like you to go with me on my next day off." Harper smiled and agreed. 2 weeks later, Harper and I visited the church where Emma's ashes were interred. I thought she'd be reluctant when I mentioned it, but to my surprise, Harper remained calm. In fact, her composed demeanor made it seem like she had expected this all along. "Are you okay?"
Andrew, you're wearing your feelings on your face too much. I guessed this was where we'd go and prepared myself mentally.
As expected, Harper's thoughts were mature beyond her 18 years. Her environment must have forced her to grow up faster than most. I felt a small pang of sadness in my heart. Even when I explained the situation to the priest and mentioned that Harper was Emma's biological daughter, he showed no sign of surprise. It wasn't a special anniversary or anything, but I'd been too busy lately to visit, so this felt like the right opportunity. After reading the Bible and talking to the priest, I asked Harper, "Be honest with me. How have you felt about your mother? About Emma? All this time?" She could have simply said she hated her and left it at that. But her eyes told me there was more to the story. Harper looked down and answered softly,
It's true that I hated her. She abandoned me and never came to see me. That's a fact. But after I found out the truth,
Harper had spent her time at the orphanage resenting Emma for giving birth to her and leaving her behind for selfish reasons. I understood her feeling. Though our circumstances were different, I'd experienced something similar myself. The truth is, I was an unwanted child. I was born out of an affair. My birth mother cheated on my father with another man, resulting in my conception. My father realized I wasn't his biological child when I was around 6 months old. Apparently, he'd had suspicion since my mother's pregnancy and secretly had a test done, confirming I wasn't his. Since my mother was blood type A and my father was type B, they probably didn't notice anything unusual when I was born with type AB. So, unlike me, Harper was born with at least some love, but it was clear that she carried the same emotional darkness within her. I stayed quiet and continued listening to Harper.
there was a time you came to the orphanage with a woman. I knew right away it was her. The mother who abandoned me. We looked so alike it was infuriating.
Early in my relationship with Emma, I told her about my donations to the orphanage and continued even after we got married. Emma had said, "I'd like to visit too," and she came with me once. Harper must have been talking about that visit. When we were about to leave after playing with the children, I noticed Emma was missing, and then I found her speaking with the orphanage director.
When these kids get a little older, please give this to them.
She handed the director a paper bag and returned to me with her usual calm demeanor, so I didn't ask any questions. Harper continued.
The bag had dresses for the girls that looked like princess gowns and superhero costumes for the boys. Everyone was thrilled. But I refused to wear what that woman gave me. I tried to throw mine away.
Harper kept her head down as she spoke.
But I couldn't help but try it on. It fit perfectly. And it wasn't just mine, every outfit was tailored to match each child's size and preferences. She had made them all by hand.
Now that she mentioned it, I did remember Emma staying up late at night sewing something.
At the time, I thought, there's no way this makes up for what she did. But I couldn't hate her as much after that. It dawned on me that, in her own way, she was facing her guilt. By the time I was in middle school, I had come to terms with it. I processed everything slowly, bit by bit. That's why I gathered the courage to come see you. I found out she passed away right before I came.
I could only listen silently. After Harper mentioned having a headache, I thought I had pushed her too hard and took her back to her dorm before heading home. After that, my life became hectic again, and I had fewer opportunities to talk with Harper one-on-one. She was busy with her studies, and with exams approaching, she often spoke with my supervisor rather than me. Then, one day, Harper was rushed into the hospital as an emergency patient. She was unconscious and deathly pale, a critical condition that needed immediate attention. She had collapsed while wandering through a nearby city during a canceled morning class and was found by a passerby who called for help. Fortunately, she was close to the hospital, so not much time had passed before she was brought in. As a neurosurgeon, I knew exactly what had happened. Harper, only 18 years old, had suffered a stroke. It's rare for teenagers to develop such conditions. Even medical reports show that cases in young people are extremely uncommon. But just because it's rare doesn't mean it can't happen, especially in Harper's case, with her family history. I knew that Emma's mother, my mother-in-law, had passed away due to a stroke, and I determined that it was likely genetic. Harper had complained of headaches both when we first met and during our last conversation, yet I failed to notice the signs. I felt my hands trembling as I thought to myself that I was truly a failure as a doctor this time. Would it already be too late, just like it had been with Emma? For a brief moment, doubt clouded my mind. 1 hour earlier, the head of neurosurgery had entered another surgery, leaving me as the only available surgeon in this critical situation. Fortunately, I had performed stroke surgeries many times and had the knowledge and skills necessary. As beads of sweat formed on my palms, an image of Emma flashed in my mind, how she had grown weaker day by day until she passed away with a final, fragile smile. If I didn't act with each passing second, Harper's life would slip further away. Is this really the right choice? I kept asking myself that question over and over in those brief moments until I finally arrived at an answer. Hearing that a young medical student had collapsed, several senior doctors gathered around. An emergency physician was present as well, ready to assist with resuscitation during the operation. One of the senior doctors placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're the one who has to do it." At that moment, my resolve solidified. I had to do this. No, I would do this. Prepare for emergency surgery immediately. With my shout, the nurses and doctors sprang into action, quickly getting everything ready. I turned to Harper, her face pale and unconscious, and spoke softly. "You'll be okay. I promise I'll save you. I won't make the same mistake again. I've decided I will save you, no matter what." In no time, the operating room was prepared. Just moments ago, my hands had been shaking uncontrollably, but the moment Harper's image perfectly overlapped with Emma's in my mind, the trembling stopped. I couldn't lose anyone ever again. I repeated that to myself and reset my focus. The fear and self-loathing I had felt earlier vanished completely, and my body, my fingers, moved naturally, driven solely by the purpose of saving the life before me. The surgery lasted for several hours, but I managed to save Harper's life. Back then, I lost Emma without being able to do anything, but this time, I felt relieved that I was able to protect someone important to me. In that moment, I found myself questioning the thought that had crossed my mind. Someone important. I found myself saying it aloud. It dawned on me that I had come to see Harper as someone precious during the time we spent together. Realizing that, I let out a dry, hollow laugh. If only I had realized it sooner. Maybe I did realize it, but kept turning away from it. Maybe she got tired of waiting and decided to throw the ultimate test my way. Looking at Harper's sleeping face, still under anesthesia, I quietly left the hospital room. A few days later, Harper regained consciousness. She looked around the room with unfocused eyes, trying to make sense of where she was.
Why am I here?
Are you okay? Do you feel any pain anywhere?
Andrew.
When I explained the situation to Harper, she listened in a daze at first, but gradually started to grasp what had happened and became flustered. Fortunately, because the surgery had been performed quickly, there were few lasting effects. I explained that although she would need to stay in the hospital and go through rehabilitation, she would eventually return to her normal life. When I heard that the emergency patient was you, Harper, I was genuinely shocked. But as a neurosurgeon, it's also my responsibility for not paying more attention to your headaches. Still, I'm really glad I was able to save you. Harper let out a relieved sigh and began moving her fingers, checking them over and over again. Why are you paying so much attention to your fingers?
Because if my fingers don't move, I can't do anything. I've decided I'm going to be an OBGYN. I made that decision a long time ago.
At first, I wondered why she was so determined to become an OBGYN, but Harper revealed her complicated feelings.
I heard that my mother had to have a full hysterectomy because of an amniotic fluid embolism. It's an extremely difficult condition to predict, and from what I've read, the doctors at the time did everything they could. The fact that she survived childbirth at all proves that. But she ultimately died from breast cancer, which later spread to her brain. She was plagued by reproductive health issues from beginning to end. I never got to thank her for the handmade dress she gave me before she passed. So I've decided to help make sure fewer women have to suffer like she did.
Harper had made that decision long ago, likely when she was much younger. For a girl so young to reach such a profound conclusion. The more I thought about it, the more I felt the weight of Harper's struggles flow into me, as though I could feel the life she'd lived until now. Despite everything, Harper had gathered and sorted all her emotions and turned them into a purpose. That was something few people could do. I, on the other hand, still harbored resentment toward the mother who gave birth to me and the father who abandoned me. I could already picture myself demanding answers if I ever met them again, skipping any formal greetings. Moreover, having grown up in an orphanage myself, I'm someone who can understand just how grueling it must be to pursue medical school under those circumstances. That's why I felt a complex mix of emotions toward Harper. You've worked hard up until now, but you don't have to keep pushing yourself so hard anymore. When things get tough, lean on the adults around you. You're a human being too, Harper. You deserve to be respected. Don't try to carry everything alone. That's the only thing I ask of you. As I gently patted her shoulder, Harper gave a ticklish laugh and said,
Then, can I call you Dad?
She smiled as she made her usual joke. On any other day, I would have immediately responded, no way. But today, I couldn't bring myself to say it. It was because I had finally become aware of my own feelings. Call me whatever you like, Dad, Father, Pops, or even Your Majesty. I tried to joke along with Harper's playful tone, but she just froze, her eyes wide and unblinking. Worried that my joke hadn't landed, Harper was in large tears. She had always tried to mask her true feelings with a mature expression, but at that moment, she looked like the young girl she really was.
Really? I can be part of your family?
Her voice was shaky with sobs, and I gently answered her question. We made a promise, didn't we? Besides, there's a reason I didn't want kids. Harper's eyes widened as she listened to my words. A little while later, Harper was discharged from the hospital. A few days after that, we visited the orphanage where she had lived. Since I'd been regularly supporting the orphanage, they quickly gave their blessing for the adoption process. From now on, Harper would no longer use the Johnson surname, but would take my family name, Miller. When I first explained the situation to the orphanage director, she was surprised, but soon softened her expression and said,
You were so afraid, weren't you? You believed that someone like you, born from an affair, didn't deserve to be a parent. You thought that any child you raised would be unhappy. That's why you didn't want kids. But seeing you with Emma changed that.
Just as the director said, my mindset had gradually started to change after I began living with Emma. I was aware of it. There were times I even thought that maybe it wouldn't have been so bad to have a child with Emma or even adopt one. But just as I was about to bring up the idea with her, Emma was diagnosed with breast cancer. I convinced myself that fate wouldn't allow me to have children and buried those feelings deep within me. Even after Emma passed away, I vowed to love her, and only her, for the rest of my life, and to never have children. But in the end, I think I was destined to be someone's parent after all. That's probably why I reached this decision now. I used to think stuff like this was just superstition, and I never believed in it. But adopting Harper, Emma's biological daughter, also feels like destiny. Because from the moment we met, Harper and I had already made a promise to become family. Now I feel like I can finally move forward without being trapped by the past. As I said this, I stood next to the director, watching Harper play with the children at the orphanage. From that point on, Harper demonstrated the same sharp intellect as Emma and passed her medical licensing exam on her first try. After completing her residency, she chose obstetrics and gynecology without hesitation. Looking at Harper in her white coat, I couldn't help but see Emma in her. Fate really does exist, doesn't it? Emma, you were meant to sit in that chair, but now your daughter Harper is the one sitting there. I think you can rest easy now. With that, I slowly placed Emma's medical license back into my drawer.